British business partner in South Florida. Better. He is a chiropractor. He holds a diplomat in chiropractic pediatrics. Is one of three in the state of Florida with that level of training. I'd like to welcome Dr. Ian Shtulman. You can also call him Seahorse.
Can you all hear?
One of the most exciting scientific findings of the past half-century has been the discovery of widespread trophic cascades. A trophic cascade is an ecological process which starts at the top of the food chain and tumbles all the way down to the bottom. And the classic example is what happened in the Yellowstone National Park in the United States when wolves were reintroduced in 1995. Now, we all know that wolves kill various species of animals, but perhaps we're slightly less aware that they give life to many others. Before the wolves turned up, they'd been absent for 70 years. That the numbers of deer, because there was nothing to hunt them, had built up and built up in the Yellowstone Park, and despite efforts by humans to control them, they'd managed to reduce much of the vegetation there to almost nothing. They'd just grazed it away. But as soon as the wolves arrived, even though they were few in number, they started to have the most remarkable effects. First, of course, they killed some of the deer, but that wasn't the major thing. Much more significantly, they radically changed the behavior of the deer. The deer started avoiding certain parts of the park, the places where they could be trapped most easily, particularly the valleys and the gorges. And immediately those places started to regenerate. In some areas, the height of the trees quintupled in just 6 years. Bare valley sides quickly became forests of aspen and willow and cottonwood. And as soon as that happened, the birds started moving in. The number of songbirds, of migratory birds, started to increase greatly. The number of beavers started to increase because beavers like to eat the trees. And beavers, like wolves, are ecosystem engineers. They create niches for other species. And the dams they built in the rivers provided habitats for otters and muskrats and ducks and fish and reptiles and amphibians. The wolves killed coyotes, and as a result of that, the number of rabbits and mice began to rise, which meant more hawks, more weasels, more foxes, more badgers. Ravens and bald eagles came down to feed on the carrion that the wolves had left. Bears fed on it too, and their population began to rise as well, partly also because there were more berries growing on the regenerating shrubs. And the bears reinforced the impact of the wolves by killing some of the calves of the deer. But here's where it gets really interesting. The wolves changed the behavior of the rivers. They began to meander less. There was less erosion. The channels narrowed, more pools formed, more riffle sections, all of which were great for wildlife habitats. The rivers changed in response to the wolves. And the reason was that the regenerating forests stabilized the banks so that they collapsed less often, so that the rivers became more fixed in their course. Similarly, by driving the deer out of some places and the vegetation recovering on the valley sides, there was less soil erosion because the vegetation stabilized that as well. So the wolves, small in number, transformed not just the ecosystem of the Yellowstone National Park, this huge area of land, but also its physical geography.
I didn't make the video. Little things make a big difference. All of us have been around pregnant women who have seemingly had everything together. They chose the best provider, they chose the best hospital, they prepared themselves through hypnobirthing, and they did chiropractic and ate well and did nutrition, and yet they still didn't have the experience that they wanted to have. And the reason being is that there are a lot of little things when it comes to birth. You're familiar with these. Now the thing is that these little things aren't really all that little. Things like prenatal expectations. Does mom, in the course of getting pregnant, in the course of growing a human being inside her, does she expect everything to be miserable? Does she expect to be uncomfortable? Does she expect fear? Does she expect pain? What has she been programmed to believe about what her body is capable of doing? Fear, anxiety, uncertainty. This absolutely plagues women in this country, at least. And I'm sure it's in other countries as well, is that women go into pregnancy expecting the worst. They go in afraid of birth. Prenatal nutrition. What are moms eating? Right now, we know that our food content is less nutrition than it has ever been. We have more food that works less for us than at any time in history. Are the women who are pregnant coming into your practices, coming into your classes, are they eating good, nutritious food, taking good supplements, filling their body with the things that they need to grow not only themselves, but a healthy human being inside them? Or are they eating fast food every day, Diet Coke, consuming all sorts of junk food, filling both their body and baby with building materials that aren't really all that healthy? Physical activity. Are they like most people in this country, that they wake up and they sit in a car and go to work and they sit all day and then they sit in the car back and then they sit on the couch and then they go right back to bed and they wake up and rinse and repeat? Or are they moving? Are they standing? Are they going to prenatal yoga classes? Are they taking care of themselves? Are they able to get up and move throughout the day and use their body? Are they doing things like chiropractic? Are they doing things like working out? What are they doing to fill their body with nutritious movement? Social circles. Women have this desire to share their birth experience, but what you'll notice, and this goes, by the way, the same thing when it comes to reviews of your classes, people are much more likely to share their negative experiences than they are their positive ones, right? Choices in birth providers, right? There are obviously some amazing birth providers, midwives, doctors, but there are also some ones that aren't very good, that aren't very supportive. Who are they choosing? Who is the person that every single clinical visit is reinforcing their negative expectations? Or are they lifting them up and reassuring them and working with them and giving them recommendations to help find the best possible support team for them? Where are they birthing? In South Florida, we have hospitals that have cesarean rates at 30%. We have hospitals that have cesarean rates at 63%. Where are you birthing? Because it's not just about the facility, it's about what that facility offers and the philosophy of that facility that ultimately determines the staff who are there to support. A bad nurse can be worse than a bad OB. Language of birth. Are we lifting women up to talk about physiologic birth and what's normal and natural and what's appropriate? Or are we scaring them into thinking that they have a medical condition, that they have some sort of disease that needs to be managed, that needs to be controlled, that needs to be augmented? Freedom to move and eat in birth. How can you possibly run a marathon if you're not staying hydrated and providing your body with good nutrition? Yet women are expected to walk into a hospital at 2 centimeters, not be allowed to drink, not be allowed to eat, not be allowed to move, and we're expecting a baby to come out of them. Feelings of being respected. Does a doctor ask permission before they do a cervical exam? Or do they just walk in there, lube up, and go right in? I'm sorry, but that's rape. We need to be aware of that. If you're not doing this, if you're not treating women with respect and their own personal autonomy, their right to control their body, and when they get checked and when they don't get checked, then it is not a respectful situation. Support of the birthing person and the partner. Is the partner being supported? Are they included? Are their questions being answered? Do the nurses come in and treat both the partner and the birthing person with respect? Or are they judging them? Are they giving them a hard time? Are they making little sly comments that take away their power and take away everything that they have going towards this birth? The position of birth. The position of birth has a huge influence on pelvic dynamics. When we take a look at the pelvis, right? In a normal birth, you have to have both the sacrum to nutate and you have to have the pelvic bones to open up. Something like this, right? But when women are stuck in the supine lithotomy position and they're stuck on their back, the sacrum no longer has the opportunity to nutate. It no longer has the opportunity to open up. And so as a result, you're only getting the stretching here instead of the full expansion of the pelvic floor. Not to mention, is there a single person in the world that feels empowered in this position? Physically or emotionally. If I sat here in front of a room of strange doctors and nurses, I love that you are all taking pictures right now. If I sat here, not only is my pelvis closing by about 30%, but what I'm also doing is I'm completely giving away my power in probably the most vulnerable position at the most vulnerable time a woman will ever be in her life. Are we giving women the freedom to listen to their body, or are we telling them how they should be positioned? Are we doing what's convenient for the doctor, or are we doing what's convenient for mom and baby? Observers in birth. Birth is not a spectator sport. When I first started attending births and adjusting women in labor, I used to like to hang around a little bit and see, if it worked, and, I loved, doing all that. And then I was at a birth, and I didn't have anywhere to go to the next day. I was getting on a plane, and I came in, and I adjusted the mom, and I said, you know what? I'm going to hang around a little bit, and I'll come back, and I'll get you checked again and adjust you. Right? This was like at 2 in the morning. I was getting on a plane at 8 in the morning, so I was like, whatever, I'll just stay up the whole night. And I sat there, and I remember this weird feeling, because I would walk around, and I go into like the little nursing station, and I got little things of peanut butter and graham crackers, and got a cup of coffee. And at one point, I found myself sitting in the room, just like lounging back on one of the couches, eating peanut butter and graham cracker and sipping my coffee while this mom's in labor. I'm like, this doesn't feel right. Right? This feels awkward. And I guarantee you that my presence there had an influence on mom. Right? Dr. Buckley mentioned the other night about how important it is for women to feel safe, respected, unobserved. When you have nurses constantly coming in and out, when you have parents or grandparents who really aren't all that welcome, but the mom doesn't feel empowered to tell them, get the hell out of the room, it creates a situation where they don't feel safe, where they don't feel they can just let go and release all of that physical and emotional tension that resides within them. Women need to know that they have the right to tell anybody, a nurse or a doctor or a parent or anybody, to get out. And by the way, sometimes that includes spouses. Birth is not a spectator sport. This is about mom and baby. And anybody who can support them is welcome, and anybody who doesn't can get out. And we also need to talk about the structure and balance of the body. Is the body performing the way that it needs to, or is there something physically that's interfering with that? And this is really where chiropractic comes in. This is me adjusting a mom in early birth, and I can always tell how far along a mom is based on how much clothes she's wearing. Now, I really didn't expect to be adjusting women during birth until I was in my office on a Saturday morning. I'd been in practice maybe 2 months. And in the course of all of my training, even the prenatal training, a lot of it is very classroom-based. Or it's like set up, right, where you pretend to adjust. You're just kind of doing posology. And I didn't really have that experience of adjusting a woman in birth until a Saturday morning, and I get a phone call from a doula. And she says, Ian, I have this mom. Her waters broke 18 hours ago, and things haven't been progressing. Baby's still really high up. She's been on Pitocin for the last 12 hours with no change, with no progression, with no dilation, and she's not even feeling any surges. Is there anything chiropractic can do? And as a new graduate in practice for 2 months, I'm like, absolutely. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there like, I have no idea what to do. But I knew from my training that if her structure was off, correcting that structure or reducing that disruption is going to facilitate the body to do what it's designed to do. So I showed up, and the mom, was standing there in a gown, and she goes, "Oh, hi, I'm Trisha. So nice to meet you. Thank you for coming out." And I'm like, "You were nowhere near this baby, right? Like you've got a long way to go if this is how you're interacting with me." And I told her she'd never been to a chiropractor before. I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for any distortion, any subluxation in your spine or pelvis that may be interfering with what your body is supposed to do, and I'm going to try to correct that. So I did something that looks just like this. I checked your pelvis, and I found that the entire pelvis was distorted, and I made a gentle correction, very easy, very safe. The hospital midwife was there just kind of like wondering what the heck I'm doing, and that was it. And I told her, in the confidence of an arrogant 2-month, new doctor, that give it about 20 minutes and you'll notice some changes. All right, take care. And I walked out. Meanwhile, the rest of the day, I'm sitting there staring at my phone, waiting to hear something for the doula. What the heck happened? Like, did this help? Did I kill mom and baby? Like, what's going on? And the next morning, the doula texts me and says, "Hey, about an hour after you left, she had a second release of fluids. She went from 2 up to 2 down. She went from 3 centimeters dilated to 7 centimeters dilated, and she started feeling surges for the first time. And a couple hours later, she progressed to a vaginal birth." And in that moment, I sat back and I said, wow, this chiropractic thing is so much more than what people realize, and even what I realized in the moment. And so what are we here to do, right? We're here to embrace women embracing the power of instinctual birth. Now, instinctual is an interesting word because it's actually got very strong roots in the chiropractic profession. And I wanted to figure out exactly what instinctual meant, so I decided to look it up. And that's what we do, right? We Google everything. So relating to or denoting an innate, typically fixed pattern of behavior based on instinct. Now, innate is a pretty strong word in chiropractic. In chiropractic, we teach in first quarter every single student that the body has an inborn, innate intelligence, a wisdom that continually regulates and coordinates every function of the body and allows us to successfully adapt to an ever-changing environment. That innate intelligence resides within all living things, and it's why a sunflower will turn towards a window with sun. Right? It's why our bodies shiver when we get cold to generate heat. It's why when we have food poisoning or we eat something toxic, our body gets it out any way that it can. That's the innate wisdom, the innate intelligence that resides within all people. Now, the thing is I didn't know about that when I first started chiropractic school. My dad's a chiropractor. I've been adjusted since the day I was born, but I assumed what most people assumed, which is that chiropractic is really just about helping people feel better. Well, I got into chiropractic school, and in my first quarter, I decided to go to one of these student clubs. And the philosophy instructor was the advisor, and he stood up and he read a passage that I'll never forget. It's from the man named B.J. Palmer, who is really the developer of the chiropractic profession. And what he said in this chapter, it's called The Inner Power Speaks. He's talking specifically about that innate intelligence and the power that chiropractors work with in the body. And he said, we chiropractors work with the subtle substance of the soul. We release the prisoned impulse, the tiny rivulet of force that emanates from the mind and flows over the nerves to the cells and stirs them into life. We deal with the magical power that transforms common food into living, loving, thinking clay, that robes the earth with beauty and hues and scents the flowers with the glory of the morning air. In the dim, dark, distant long ago, when the sun first bowed to the morning star, this power spoke and there was life. It quickened the slime of the sea and the dust of the earth and drove the cell into union with its fellows, into countless living forms. Through eons of time, it finned the fish and winged the birds and fanged the beasts. Endlessly it worked, evolving its form until it produced the crowning glory of them all. Through tireless effort, it blows the bubble of life into each individual soul, and then silently, relentlessly, dissolves the form, absorbing the spirit into itself again. And yet you ask, can chiropractic cure appendicitis or the flu? Have you more faith in a knife or a spoonful of medicine than the innate power that animates the internal living world? And I heard that. And all of a sudden I was like, whoa! And I realized in that moment that chiropractic was so much more than just physical discomfort and physical pain. That we were working with that innate wisdom, that innate intelligence that regulates everything. Now, a couple weeks later, I got to hear Jeannie Ohm. And Jeannie Ohm is the executive director of the International Chiropractic Pediatric Association. And she's kind of the, for lack of a better term, the godmother of pediatric and prenatal chiropractic. And she spoke so passionately about that innate wisdom, that innate intelligence that B.J. Palmer wrote about, that is intimately tied into the birthing process, and that women are the complete embodiment of that innate intelligence, that the birthing process is the expression of that innate intelligence, where you could have one cell from a man, one cell from a woman come together to produce one cell, half a cell producing one cell. And that cell divides and divides and differentiates and differentiates. And in the course of 10 months produces a living, breathing human child that then mother knows how to get out of her body and then nourish and feed without ever having to go to school, without ever having to be trained to do it. That wisdom is the complete embodiment of what pregnancy and birth is. And that's when I fell in love with pregnancy. And that's when I knew that the rest of my life was going to be serving moms and serving babies through chiropractic. Now, that's not really, the philosophy of chiropractic is not any different than the philosophy of hypnobirthing, right? What does chiropractic say? There's an innate intelligence that regulates pregnancy, birth, and all other functions. What does hypnobirthing say? Women have an inborn wisdom that regulates everything. Birth is normal, natural, instinctual. Women have everything they need. The less intervention, the better. Physical, chemical, emotional factors can interfere with birth, whereas chiropractic helps to reduce the physical interference. Hypnobirthing has a huge impact on the emotional interference, and that's what we're going to talk about. Structure influences function, and this is where chiropractic really comes in. So let's review a little bit about that. When we take a look at the uterus sits inside the pelvis, right? And it's attached at various points to the inside of the pelvic rim. So if we take a look right here, there's the cervix, there's the anus or the rectum, and there's the bladder. And you can see these dark gray fibers coming off, and they all center right around that cervix. What's interesting is that there are several connections where that cervix is actually anchored to the front via the two pubocervical ligaments. It's anchored to the back via the two uterosacral ligaments, and to the sides via the transverse cardinal ligaments. So the position of the cervix, the ability of that cervix to dilate equally, the ability of that cervix to be positioned properly, depends on the tension in the ligaments to which it's anchored to the pelvis. And we also see in the front, we have the round ligament, which passes down from the anterior portion of the uterus, down through the inguinal canal and attaches into the labia majora. So this uterus is anchored or tied in. Then we also take a look at the muscles. We've got the levator ani muscles, which circle and completely wrap around the uterus. We have the piriformis muscles. We have all of those pelvic floor muscles that help create a nice little hammock for everything underneath it. And then you have the psoas muscles that come from the lower spine, go down around the uterus through the pelvis and attaches into the hip. Now here's what happens. Unfortunately, pregnancy is the perfect storm of structural deformation. It really is. Because what you have is around week 16 to 18, the hormone called relaxin spikes. And relaxin is one of those hormones that's absolutely named perfectly for what it does, which is relax the ligaments. Okay? When you take a look at the pelvis needs to be able to expand to accommodate the growth of the baby, but it also needs to be able to expand to accommodate the descent and the transition of baby out. And if those ligaments aren't stretching and relaxing and moving, then that becomes impossible. But the problem is that also leads to a structural susceptibility where that pelvis has less stabilization than it's ever had at any point. Additionally, women gain on average between 20 to 40 pounds during a typical pregnancy. Obviously, some women gain a lot more. So that increased weight gain puts more stress on those SI joints, put more stress on the pelvis than women have ever had. Not to mention that because the postural changes, where the belly goes out and the pelvis rocks forward and mom leans back and you create that kind of waddle situation, that process puts even more stress on those SI joints. So you have a pelvis that's designed to house and get baby out that is now has less stability than it ever did, has more physical weight, and has more postural distortion putting on it. And we wonder why women come in with these torqued or twisted pelvises that affect birth. Because the reality is, when the pelvis is off, it absolutely affects what's happening inside. This is what we refer to in chiropractic as a subluxation. A subluxation literally means a shift in a joint that affects its normal biomechanics and interferes with the nervous system that passes through those joints, right? That's the best way to describe it. So when we take a look at what happens in a subluxation, when the sacrum rotates backwards, it pulls on the uterosacral ligament, which torques the uterus, and the uterus is anchored on the opposite side in the front by the round ligament. So what you have is a pelvis that's shifted, and the entire uterus is torqued, which obviously affects the position of the baby. When we talk about position, we need to see that the baby's head is perfectly situated in the middle of the cervix, right? We want to see those cranial bones anchored right there in the middle. Because if those cranial bones, the normal process is as baby is gradually pushed down through the birth canal, as baby glides himself out, those cranial bones actually overlap, right? That's why they're so soft. And you've seen this with cranial molding in some of your clients, that the cranial bones overlap, and once the head comes out, those cranial bones pop back open. And that sensation of the compression and popping open actually starts the normal flow of cerebrospinal fluid from the brain down through the spinal canal into the sacral well that's required for normal neurological function. This is the whole philosophy behind craniosacral technique. This is the philosophy behind the chiropractic technique, sacrooccipital technique. It's all about making sure that that CSF is able to flow normally, because that's what's required for normal neurological function. Otherwise, you build up metabolic waste, you don't get as much oxygen as you need, and it hurts the developing nervous system of baby. Now, we know if that head is not perfectly engaged against the cervix, then you're not going to get the normal cranial molding. You're not going to get the equal pressure on the cervix, and the cervix won't dilate as well as it should or as quickly as it should, and that leads to a longer, more difficult birth for both mom and baby. When we compare occipital posterior versus occipital anterior presentation, right? We want baby to be in that occipital anterior position. When we compare the two, we see that spontaneous birth occurs 83% in an occipital anterior presentation, but it only occurs in a posterior presentation of 37%. We see that assisted vaginal birth, the need for intervention, the need for epidural, the need for Pitocin, the need for forceps or vacuum increases from 9% to 24%. Cesarean rate from 6% to 37%. And third or fourth degree tears of the pelvic floor from 6% to 18%. The position of baby makes a huge difference. We can't focus just on the emotional component. We have to address the structural component also, or it's not going to help as much as it could. This is where chiropractic and hypnobirthing work really, really well together, and why I've essentially told every single patient, regardless of what else they do, they need to do hypnobirthing as a way of preparing themselves emotionally. When we look at Williams Obstetrics, the kind of main textbook for obstetricians, they talk about the 3 P's of dystocia. They talk about passenger, which is the position of baby and the ability of baby to get out. They talk about the passageway, the performance of the pelvis, the tension in the uterine ligaments, the tension in the pelvic floor muscles. And they also talk about power. Power is regulated by that nervous system, right, that we've been hearing about from so many people this weekend. The nervous system that regulates the onset and progression of birth and regulates contraction patterns and regulates surges and regulates the fetal ejection reflex that Dr. Buckley mentioned on Friday night. Now, this is what chiropractic does. Very simply, chiropractic restores normal pelvic biomechanics. In doing so, it reduces uterine tension, it reduces pelvic floor tension. It helps moms experience a more comfortable pregnancy. It helps moms have baby be prepared in the best position. It helps mom's pelvis move normally and accommodate so that baby can navigate that way down through the birth canal. And it helps mom recover faster postpartum. This is chiropractic. If every single one of your clients did chiropractic in addition to hypnobirthing, I guarantee you're going to see not just better birth outcomes, but I guarantee you're going to also see lower rates of intervention, and you're going to see much greater maternal satisfaction as well as babies benefit. Okay? Now, the other reason why chiropractic is tied into all of this is the nervous system, and this is something that is obviously very relevant to hypnobirthing. There's three components. Well, let me go back. The nervous system, I want you to get a much bigger picture for what it does. Every second of every single day, you are experiencing a changing environment, both externally to your body and internally. And the nervous system is the interface between you and the rest of the world. The nervous system is responsible for perceiving changes that are happening all around you, transmitting that up the appropriate routes to the brain, and the brain being able to interpret, process, and decide how to respond, and then send signals back down to all of the parts of the body to direct the appropriate response so that the body can adapt to those changes. If we had to summarize the nervous system in one word, if we had to summarize health in one word, it's adaptability. The more we're capable of adapting to an ever-changing world around us, the more that we're able to process everything appropriately. Digestion, immune system, emotional balance, how we interact with others, how we handle stress. All of these things matter. Now, there are three parts of the nervous system. The motor nervous system, which is the part that allows the body to move, and every time you move and every time you utilize your muscles, you're activating that motor nervous system. There's also the sensory nervous system, which in addition to our 5 special senses, we also have a sensation of deep pressure and heat and vestibular function and proprioception, all of these other things that we see a lot in young kids with sensory processing disorders, right? The other component of the nervous system that's really important is the autonomic nervous system. Now, the autonomic nervous system, I know you've heard about this weekend. It talks about how the body is able to automatically regulate an appropriate response in our organs and glands. Now, there are 2 components to the autonomic nervous system. There's the sympathetic, which is the fight or flight survival mode, and then there's the parasympathetic, which is the rest and digest. Now, which one do you think this represents? Is that more of a sympathetic fight or flight look, or is that more of a rest and digest look? Fight or flight, right? Like, this is a koala bear that is very clearly on the alert. They're very concerned about what's happening around them. You can see that they're kind of braced up. They're ready to either fight or run. Their eyes are open really wide, looking for all sorts of changes. I guarantee you their heart rate and blood pressure are increased so that their muscles have more blood so that they can run away or do whatever they need to defend themselves. This is the state that most adult human beings in this country are in all the time. Chronically stressed, chronically worried, chronically afraid, chronically in pain. And the problem is that when it comes to birth, this has a huge effect, and it doesn't allow things to progress normally, and we'll talk about that in a second. Now, compare that to this. This is a koala bear that is not really afraid for their life. This is a koala bear that is in that rest and digest, that parasympathetic. So what happens is when we're stuck in a state of fight or flight, when we experience a threat, our body shifts into the sympathetic overload so that we're ready to fight, that we're ready to run away, and we can protect ourselves. And as soon as the threat is gone, the body is able to shift itself back into a parasympathetic mode and rest and digest and relax and do what it needs to. That needs to happen, and the body needs to be able to fluctuate back and forth. Now, this isn't new to you. This is in your manual, right? So the effect of fear upon labor is not subtle, insidious, or complex. We see it in front of us with every labor that is delayed in starting or labor slows or stalls. Let me read off this. The negative physical effect of fear on labor can be traced to the function of the body's autonomic nervous system. The ANS is the communication network within our body. Its main function is to interpret the messages it receives, determine what action should be taken as a result of the message, and then immediately communicate the directive to the other systems of the body. The responses to impulses that are transmitted through the ANS are not subject to our conscious control and are therefore involuntary. I'll disagree with that last statement just a little bit. That it's not under our conscious control because most of us aren't conscious to what's happening in our body. We have the ability to consciously affect our autonomic nervous system. And if you don't believe that, then you shouldn't be teaching hypnobirthing. Because that's what you do. Meditation, visualization, breathing exercises, all of these are conscious ways to control your autonomic nervous system activity. So if we take a look specifically at birth or pregnancy, we can see, and I'm not going to go through all of this, but I want you to realize that when a woman is stuck in a chronic state of fight or flight, not all, but much of the blood and nerve activity that should be going to baby are diverted elsewhere to help that mom protect herself. When mom is in a parasympathetic balance, we see that they're much more relaxed, that things progress normally. Now, in South Florida, we have this really cool experience where we get to go out and see sea turtles. And I don't know if anybody's ever done that before, but you go at night, usually around like 11 o'clock, it's really dark, and you sit in this room, and then all of a sudden, somebody comes in and says, "Hey guys, we got one, be really, really quiet." And so about 15, 20 of us kind of go out there in a single file line, no cell phones, no lights, no sound, absolute silence. And we position ourselves right behind, maybe only a foot or two away, from this 800-pound sea turtle that's just plopping eggs out left and right. And when you're there, you see the sea turtle in this state. They're almost in a trance. They're like moving back and forth. Their eyes are closed. They're really relaxed. And those eggs are just one after another after another. I mean, you can see the peristaltic contraction of everything that's pushing everything out. And then all of a sudden, we see off in the distance somebody was driving an ATV, a four-wheeler. And you can hear it. And all of a sudden, you see everything stop. The turtle just freezes. Her eyes open up. She completely stops laying eggs, and she kind of braces herself and lifts her off the sand just a little bit. And she sits there. And she waits until you can no longer hear the ATV. She closes her eyes, relaxes, and starts plopping out eggs again. The perception of something that might be dangerous, the perception of fear, a threat, causes her body to immediately stop that normal process and immediately get to a protective instinct. What do you think happens when a woman who's afraid of the hospital walks into a hospital at 7 centimeters, rocking and rolling, and things just stop? What happens when a woman is in labor and everything's progressing and her doctor who she's trusted and built a relationship is suddenly not on call and another doctor she's never met walks in? What happens when a nurse comes in, starts poking and prodding, and starts judging the choices that she's made regarding herself and her baby? What happens when that clock is standing right there with a scale of pain from, completely, the little happy sign to a sad sign? We want this process to be normal and natural, and we're putting women in a state that is anything but. And we're asking them, why aren't things working? Why aren't things happening? Well, because an ATV is in the distance. You're trying to give them a birth experience that their body is constantly inundated with physical and emotional stressors that shift their body into a chronic state of sympathetic overload, chronic state of fight or flight. And birth does not occur in that situation. Now, here's what's cool, is we can measure this. You can measure this. There's something called heart rate variability. Now, when we think about heart rate, we think about like beats per minute, right? 60 beats, 72 beats, that there should be a certain, number of beats per minute. And we have the assumption that it should be almost on a metronome, that we should see that these beats are perfect. And the truth is that's not actually good. We need variability. And we can measure this on an EKG when we take a look at the time between the R to R interval, right, these points. And you can see that it fluctuates. It's not perfect. It's not even. And it's not supposed to be. You need a certain variation, a certain variability in your heart rate to indicate that your body is adaptable. So heart rate variability is actually a sign of how adaptable you are. How is your autonomic nervous system functioning? Are you stuck in a state of fight or flight where your physiology is in survival? Or are you in a balanced state that your body can fluctuate freely back and forth? Because we don't want women stuck in a state of fight or flight and try to have a baby. But we also don't want them stuck in parasympathetic and rest and digest, feed and breed, and try to have a baby. right? Dr. Buckley mentioned that as baby transitions, mom needs that surge of sympathetic hormones as catecholamines, which trigger the fetal ejection reflex. So what happens if mom is completely in a meditative state and is not able to access that sympathetic drive? Well, then they just stay pregnant. I mean, they don't, right? We intervene, we do things, but they're not able to get to that point, right? We get to 10 centimeters, but baby doesn't actually descend, right? So what we see is that we need a high level of adaptability. Women need to be able to shift into that parasympathetic state and progress, and then when a pain in the ass nurse comes in and gives them a hard time, they'll shift into a sympathetic state. And then when that's gone, they'll shift back into a parasympathetic state. And when they're ready for transition, they'll shift into the sympathetic state. After baby's born, they shift back into a parasympathetic state, which is going to help with milk production and all of those normal postpartum stuff. We need that fluctuation, and heart rate variability is one way to assess the adaptive capacity of a pregnant mom. In my office, we do it with a little instrument like this, where it measures the subtle fluctuation over the course of 5 minutes. But to be honest, you can use your iPhone. You can use your smartphone. There are little things, if you have like an Apple Watch or if you have a heart rate monitor, plug it in and tie it into your phone and use a heart rate variability app. And every single day you can do this and you can track, hey, you're really adaptable today. Your heart rate variability is looking really good. Hey, you're really stressed out. Your body is stuck in a state of distress. Maybe you need to do some extra meditation, some extra breathing. Maybe you need to visit your chiropractor. Maybe you need to do things to help you. Okay? This is something that you can do very cheaply and very easily with all of your hypnobirthing parents and talk about, hey, I'm so glad that you're here. We really need to work on all this stuff because you can see your body is stuck in this state of fight or flight. And that's not serving you and it's not serving baby. Because here's what happens. The body does not differentiate between a real threat or a perceived threat. And the problem is, in this country, women are programmed from a very early age to expect the absolute worst when it comes to their body, when it comes to pregnancy, when it comes to birth. So let's talk about some of the social programming. We are inundated with negative perceptions of pregnancy and birth in movies, right? Knocked Up. In television, The Walking Dead. In print, Kim's delivery room drama. In gossip and moms talking about their negative experience, right? For some reason, women feel that seeing another pregnant mom is their excuse to just lay out all of their emotional bullshit about their birth onto that mom. It always amazes me. It's like, oh, you're so pregnant. Oh, that's so beautiful. It's wonderful. I had a 72-hour labor and I tore for my, different company, I probably would have said it. This is the problem, is that women constantly are inundated with these negative stories. And one of the most powerful things about the hypnobirthing series is when instructors play videos of physiological birth. When instructors play videos of women having different types of births in different positions and having an experience that is not represented in our cultural media. Not to mention jokes, right? So this is Men in Black. If you remember that alien baby being born, right? So we make pregnancy something funny. We make pregnancy something dangerous. We make pregnancy something scary. I mean, even last night I went to see the movie A Star Is Born, right? Which is absolutely amazing. But, part of this guy's sad history is that his mom died in childbirth, right? You never hear, oh, my mom had an amazing home birth. Yeah. It was great. I was born in the water at home. Everything's wonderful. Because it doesn't fit in with that emotional draw that people have. Now, you'd hope that women who finally get pregnant and step into a model where they're with a care provider, that they would be respected and lifted up in their expectations. But unfortunately, we have a huge issue with medical bullying. And not every doctor, there are awesome doctors, but let's be honest, how many of you have heard these things from moms? You have a small pelvis. You have a really big baby. Your baby's going to get stuck if you go past 39 weeks. Natural? Yeah, okay, we'll see you for your cesarean. Home birth? Oh, all right, we'll get the cesarean ready. I've heard this from nurses at one of the best birthing hospitals in our area. I'm the doctor, not you. When did you go to medical school? We don't do birth plans in our practice. Every mom who has a birth plan has a cesarean. Do you really want a dead baby? Now, fortunately, there are wonderful doctors who don't talk like this, but unfortunately, those are the exception and not the norm. In my experience in working with thousands of pregnant women who work with dozens of OBs in our area, the doctors who are supportive and patient and encouraging and loving and lifting women up into their true power are not very common. And my experience is those doctors are better at it when there's a doula with the mom. So my experience is also that doulas who attend births, even the good doctors, are actually better when there's a doula present. It's almost like they know that somebody's watching who knows the difference. It's an interesting little dynamic that I've noticed. Now, it's not just about the emotional stuff, all of the social programming, all of the stuff that people get. Oh, by the way, when I looked for this image, I was searching for, the term was judgmental doctor. And come on, you got to be honest. You can just hear him saying, "You're going to do what with your placenta?" That's my favorite image of this entire presentation. I probably shouldn't say that. I have a picture of my babies afterwards. Sympathetic activation, this shift into a fight or flight, this shift into panic survival mode is not limited to emotional perceptions of threat. It's also contributed to physical ones. When women have that subluxation, that shift in the spine or pelvis that interferes with the nervous system, it actually decreases proprioceptive input to the brain. It reduces proprioceptive input to the brain, increases nociceptive input, and it progresses into a sympathetic activation. So this is what we see. Okay. Thank you. So that when the spine or pelvis shifts, it creates a sympathetic fight or flight response within an individual, right? That in order for us to be in that state of adaptability, in order for us to have high heart rate variability and to have a good balance and high level of adaptation, we need to have normal spinal motion, normal spinal function. Because when spinal motion is reduced, it creates a pattern in the body that leads to a chronic stress response. And I see this all day in my practice of people who have, people who are yogis, people who are trained in really relaxation and meditative properties, who are stuck in a state of fight or flight, emotional, physical distress. And when we start adjusting them, when we start making gentle chiropractic adjustments to restore normal biomechanics, it changes up that sensory input and it actually allows people to shift away from fight or flight into a state of rest and digest. By the way, pain does the same thing. So if you have a client who's in pain, if you have a client who's unhappy, who's miserable, who has nausea, who's tired, who's got a toddler that's stressing them out, who physically has sciatica or pubic bone pain or tailbone pain or pelvic floor pain, their body is also almost guaranteed to be in a state of sympathetic overactivation. Does that make sense? Cool. Now, San Antonio, we have a problem, and I came really close to that being even better. We just need to do it in Houston next time. We talk about emotional stress, medical intervention and testing, right? This idea that women need to constantly have ultrasounds or constantly to have genetic testing, or we need to constantly look for problems actually increases their emotional stress, without a doubt. And, by the way, research says doesn't really improve outcomes for mom or baby. Fear of childbirth is associated with low parasympathetic activity, aka high sympathetic activity, among low-risk pregnant women, that HRV biofeedback intervention can effectively decrease the fear of childbirth in these women. So that we're talking about this fear, this sociological fear of birth, puts women into a state of sympathetic overload, of fight or flight. And things like breathing, meditation, relaxation, all of the stuff that you're doing actually can mitigate that stress. Physical stress. Women with pelvic pain syndrome had diminished vagal or parasympathetic activity and a shift towards sympathetic nervous system dominance. When women come in with physical trauma from the birth when they were born, and learning how to walk falling on their butt, and being dropped off the changing table, and rolling off the bed, and sitting in school, and playing sports, and getting into car accidents, and talking on the phone back before we had like the wireless devices, right? All of these things are chronic stresses to the body that shift women into more of a state of sympathetic dominance. And chemical stress, poor nutrition, poor air quality, right? You think women in Flint, Michigan are having the best internal environment for baby, right? Studies show that women who are pregnant in polluted areas cause more damage to baby, right? This chemical stress that we're inundating ourselves with also has a shift into that sympathetic overload. And the reality is that we can't have a normal birth in that situation. So here's what happens. Physical, chemical, and emotional stress activates our sympathetics. That increases the maternal stress hormones, and that does two things, both to them and baby. To mom, it reduces blood flow to the reproductive organs up to 60%. Think about this for a second. If you're trying to grow a human being, and then you're trying to have that uterus contract as a muscle and push baby down and do so for however many hours that it takes, but then you're going to take away up to 60% of the blood flow and the oxygenation and everything that they need. So what happens is baby's fetal heart rate increases, baby's O2 supply decreases, and it leads to intervention. Women stuck in a state of fight or flight require more intervention because mom and baby are stressed out. But it also crosses the placenta, and it leads to a situation where babies are predisposed to things like colic and reflux and digestive issues and poor sleep. Right? The number one thing that pediatric chiropractors do for babies is shift babies from a state of sympathetic dominance to a state of autonomic balance, and their body can calm down. Women are trapped in survival mode, and birth cannot occur in survival mode. So, this is why people don't use mid-husbands. We need to talk about what's not the answer. We have a very clear problem, but the answer is not what the main part of the country is trying to do. The answer is not more medical intervention. The answer is not conventional childbirth education where you go to the hospital and they run down a list of all of the potential pain relief measures that you can do, and this is what's going to happen, and then you're going to go to the NICU and all of that. That doesn't improve birth outcomes. It just makes women feel more comfortable with that system that they're trapped in. And pain relief without structural correction is also not the answer, right? TENS units have become really popular in pregnancy. Making women feel better, being more comfortable is great, but if you're not doing anything to correct the cause of that pain, if you're not doing anything to address the structure of a pregnant mom's pelvis, then feeling better is just it's kind of a false belief. It's a false hope. So what can we do? We can and we must shift women from a state of sympathetic dominance to parasympathetic dominance, and we can do that. Things like childbirth education. The more women know, the more they feel comfortable with what's happening inside their body, the more they become comfortable with what happens in the birth process, the more they know, the better they are, right? Remember the whole NBC, the more you know. It applies. Now, the problem is in conventional childbirth education, women aren't told what's happening in their body. They're not taught to honor it. They're not taught to be amazed by the miracle of pregnancy and childbirth. They're taught these are the things you can do to control it. These are the things you can do to numb it. That's not the answer. Meditation, visualization, hypnosis, these things improve birth outcomes. They improve that sympathetic fight or flight into a parasympathetic rest and digest. Breathing. Now, right? Those top 3 bullet points are something that I know there's a group of people that do, right? Look for the gold seal. But we also need to get women moving. Physical fitness, physical activity is essential. Normal motion in the spine and pelvis facilitates an autonomic balance in mom. So prenatal yoga, aerobic exercise, all of these things are beneficial. Nutrition and structural correction as well. Because what you do works, okay? 2016, mindfulness meditation improves the parasympathetic function in pregnant women and is a powerful modulator of sympathetic nervous system in pregnancy. Mindfulness meditation, teaching women how to come inward into their body and just connect with what's happening in them, immediately reduces that fight or flight. Slow breathing techniques enhance autonomic, cerebral, and psychological flexibility. These breathing techniques that we're teaching women actually help mitigate that sympathetic dominance, help shift them into a state of balance, and let their body become more autonomically, cerebrally, and psychologically flexible. That's adaptability. That's what women need in birth. Low inhalation exhalation was associated with more power in the high frequency component, higher HRV. Results show that inhalation exhalation ratio is an important modulator for the autonomic and subjective effects of instructor ventilatory patterns. Now, the study confirmed that breathing pattern of 5.5 breaths per minute with an inhalation ratio of 5:5 achieved greater HRV than other breathing patterns. Think about this. Go home, do birth breathing, do surge breathing. You're going to find approximately 5.5 breaths per minute. You're going to find an approximate 1-to-1 ratio, right? 20, rapid 20 breaths in, rapid 20 breaths out, or to count to 20, right? That process actually helps shifting women into a state, and you're doing it at the appropriate frequency, right? And this is in 2014. Right? Hypnobirthing's been along a lot longer before this. There's a certain extent where we like science to validate what we do, but we don't need scientific studies to prove to us what we see every single day in the women we serve. Naturally born babies have higher vagal tones than cesarean babies, meaning babies born via C-section are more stressed out, are more stuck in that fight or flight pattern, and that sets them up for the rest of their life. What chiropractors do also works. When we make a structural correction, when we do an adjustment to a woman's pelvis, what it does is it normalizes uterine and pelvic floor muscle tone. It relaxes the ligaments of the lower portion of the uterus. It allows baby to get into a better position and reduces asynclitic presentation, reduces breech positions. It allows women to have a more comfortable experience. It allows women to be better physically prepared and more trusting of their body as they approach birth. It also balances the autonomic nervous system. So when we take a look, this is what I do in my office. This is an Hrv reading. And what we're looking at is on the left is the sympathetic fight or flight. On the right is the parasympathetic rest and digest. The green is where we should see, where we want to see women, where they're balanced, being able to freely fluctuate between sympathetic and parasympathetic, but that they've also got high health reserves, that their body is able to do so effectively. This was a mom, she came into us at 31 weeks. She already had 2 kids. She was planning her third home birth, and she was really stressed out, physically uncomfortable, and you can just tell her whole body was in distress. And that's what this dot shows. It's on the sympathetic side, and it's down low in the kind of danger Will Rogers section right here. Now, we started doing gentle chiropractic adjustments, restoring normal alignment to the spine and pelvis. And what we saw is over the course of just 12 visits, you can see that dot much higher and much more towards the center. She then progressed to she was not only feeling more physically comfortable through chiropractic care, but she also reported she had less anxiety, less fear of birth, less stress overall. And it's not because chiropractic does anything specifically to reduce stress, but by balancing the nervous system, women have a greater capacity to adapt to the things in their life. That's why this is so important. And she was able to progress to a natural birth at home. Now, here's something that's important, is I want you to understand that not all chiropractors are created equal, right? You would say not all teachers are created equal, right? Not all doulas are created equal. Not all OBs are created equal. We need to understand that there's a group of chiropractors who specialize in pregnancy and pediatrics. And I recommend looking at the ICPA, the International Chiropractic Pediatric Association, and specifically look for the Webster Certified designation. Now, what I've got for you, the ICPA very generously sent a couple things. These are in the back that I hope you take one on your way out. The first, it includes a little handout about Webster technique, about what chiropractors do to rebalance a woman's pelvis and how it facilitates normal pregnancy and birth. But there's also a copy of Pathways to Family Wellness. How many of you are familiar with this? Awesome. So this is a fantastic magazine. It's very, very well made, and Every single magazine is filled with positive stories about birth and pregnancy and parenthood and conscious living. It's a wonderful magazine. They sent us, I think we should have enough for everybody, but if not, just email me afterwards and we'll make sure that everybody gets one at a later point. Yes? Absolutely, because let's be honest, if either moms or babies are trapped in that sympathetic fight or flight mode, it's going to have a negative impact on their psychology and development and bonding and all of these things that we're talking about. Now, this is an example of Webster technique. Now, this mom is actually 36 weeks with twins, and you're wondering where her belly is. I have a special table that has an abdominal swing-away piece that accommodates for babies. Many chiropractors prefer using special pillows that women can lay on their belly and get adjusted. What we're doing is we're putting some gentle pressure on the sacrum, and using a little drop table facilitates a very gentle, a very safe, and a very beneficial correction to the normal biomechanics of the pelvis. By doing that, we help see that baby has more room. This is why chiropractors get labeled positive for breech births or breech babies, because by balancing the pelvis, it creates more room for baby to find the best position on their own, right? We're not manually doing any sort of versions. Why this matters. Birth is not just about the event, it's about how that event transforms both mom and baby for the rest of their lives. And we have the ability to influence that. I believe that, I think it was it Dr. J, was it you who had the quote about you change one generation of birth and you're going to change the world? Well, that's what we do. That's what we do on an individual basis. But the problem is we need to expand that. We need to have a much greater impact. We must shift ourselves and our clients from sympathetic dominance to parasympathetic. Now, healthy lifestyle, nutrition, movement, emotional reprogramming with what you do every day in your classes, postpartum support, physically, chemically, and emotionally. It doesn't serve moms to give birth and then not have physical support to help correct their body and feeling better. It doesn't help moms to have them give birth and then go right back to eating junk food. It doesn't help moms to have them give birth and then them feel emotionally alone and unsupported. We need to do a better job of providing postpartum support for mom, just as important it is to provide prenatal support to them. And obviously structural correction to restore normal pelvic biomechanics and allow the body to do what it's designed to do. More medicine will not improve birth, but when we shift women from that state of fight or flight into rest and digest, it absolutely does. Now, I'm going to share you a video. And I decided to share this before I realized that it was going to be live streamed. So I apologize to my wife, who will be naked in this. You won't see anything. It's a good camera angle. My wife is a very fearful person. She's just that personality type that she's afraid of everything. She constantly thinks of the most negative possibility, and she really focuses on that. It's hard for her to get away from that. And when we first met, I was 19, she was 18. And she was very much along the lines of, I'm definitely going to have a hospital birth with an epidural. I don't want to feel anything. And I took her to a class that was being taught all about your dream birth workshop, right? It's all about having your dream birth. And the instructor was a friend of mine who very eloquently pointed out the difference between kind of a natural physiological model and a medical model. And we went through and we talked about all of the things. And she left just 10 hours later saying, all right, I want a home birth, maybe with a midwife. And it's like, now, mind you, to give you a little perspective on me, we had only been dating a year, and I think we were barely 20 when I, forced her to go to this class. So that's, I knew what we were having for our kids. And when it came time for us to give birth, we had 2 miscarriages before we got pregnant with our oldest son. And there was a lot of fear, there was a lot of uncertainty, there was a lot of worry of, would I actually have a baby, right? We had twice before this idea that, all right, we were going to be parents, and we really didn't know until baby was there. And we used hypnobirthing to really support us. And it allowed her to go 36 hours at home with waters broken and not ever once asking for anything. Now, we had some fetal decels, and we ended up transferring to the hospital, and we had an amazing supportive physician who basically, when we were there, and they're like, oh yeah, waters have been broken for 36 hours, he just goes, okay. right? Any other physician in South Florida, and I know we would have had a cesarean, right? It would have been right there. We wouldn't have even had a choice. And this doctor was super supportive, gave us a chance to get rest, gave us a chance, did an epidural and Pitocin to get, my wife some rest, and woke up a couple hours later and pushed out a baby, no big deal, right? So when it came time a couple years later, we had even less evidence that this was possible, right? We had a quote-unquote failed home birth. We had 2 miscarriages. My wife was terrified of having another baby. She didn't know what was going to happen. She was really concerned, like, should I even try for another home birth? And what we did differently is, instead of just thinking, oh, well, I work with pregnant women all the time, I go to births all the time, we don't need to practice this stuff, we don't need to do this, we actually sat down every night and we practiced the meditation. And we practiced the breathing. And instead of thinking that we had to do things in a certain way, we just had her listen to her body and do exactly what she wanted to do, which is why we spent 11 hours on the toilet with her just, birthing naturally and just listening to her body and trusting everything. And it was just absolutely amazing. Midwives and our doula came a little bit later, and, she just rocked it. And I'm going to show you this video because I think it's important that we also understand that it's not just the fear of the birth, it's also the fear of things that arise in birth. And you hear this a lot, well, what if the cord's wrapped around baby's neck? You're going to see the cord was wrapped around my youngest son's neck 5 times. The cord was 42 inches. It was almost larger than the midwife. She held it up like this, and it went all the way from the floor to her ear. And when you have a good support system, when you have an amazing provider, when you have an amazing doula, when you're trained and practiced and you physically are structurally balanced and emotionally prepared, wonderful, amazing things happen. Now, I'll try to point out. So this is me, this is our midwife, and this is Lori McCoy. And she was just listening to her body. Now, what you're going to see in just a second is baby's going to come out, and the midwife spins him 2 times under the water to take the cord, and then unlassos 3 more times. So there's baby twice underwater. And 1, 2, 3. And you can see he came out rather floppily. He wasn't super connected in there. And so what I did is I immediately, you'll see me in just a moment, I was just blown away, amazed at what my wife was just able to do with her body, somebody who never thought it was possible. And what you'll see in just a moment is it took a little, you see the dog? And you'll see in just a moment, baby's still not really present. Baby's still not really there. Now, if we were in a hospital situation, that baby would have been taken away from us, gone to the NICU, and we wouldn't have seen them for hours. But what happened instead was we had a midwife who checked baby, and right now you can see me immediately going and adjusting baby. And as soon as I contacted that top bone in the neck, immediately he started letting out a cry, coming into himself. And this was something that was really absolutely amazing for me. Because the truth is, my wife never thought this was possible. She never trusted her body. She never gave it the credit that she ever really deserved. And it was the birth process, her feeling emotionally supported, physically prepared, that transformed her perspective not just on birth, but on who she is as a human being, on what she's capable as a woman, as a mother. And it was something that just completely changed her entire perspective on her presence in the world. Now, of course, I got baby checked also. And you can see, talking about how connected he was from the very beginning, eyes open, fully present with us. It was just incredible. Now, here's the thing. We know that birth is incredible. We know that the body is amazing. But we also know that there are little things that interfere with the innate, inborn, instinctual power that it resides within every single woman as she becomes a mom. We know that these little things that aren't so little can make a big difference. But I know that with chiropractic and hypnobirthing coming together, we can transform women, we can transform birth, and we can make an even bigger difference. Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you.
And such appreciation, Ian, for all you do. Wow. I'm speechless.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Before we break, we'd like to recognize, well, first of all, everyone in this room. I wish I had an award to hand each one of you for making the effort to be here, to learn, to become better at what we do, to support each other, and to help women make that kind of transformation. Isn't that why we do this? And to help babies come in a gentle, peaceful way that would change the world. So I honor each one of you for being here. Thank you so much. And wanted to thank those of you who have taken the time to help out with all of this and speak and present. So, Barbara Jecker. Do you want me to come to you? I could have come to you. We so appreciate Barb's energy, always, no matter what. Thank you, Barb.
Thank you so much.
Mercedes. Thank you. Congratulations. James Womack. Not here? Okay. And I think Paula Aji is also resting. Raquel. Yes, come up here. A new face for us, but a beautiful one. Thank you. Jennifer Elliott, come on up here. Every year, 5 minutes before it happens, we say, Jennifer, could you put something together? And she says, yes, and it's always fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you.
So appreciate it. Right, Shitra. Coming all the way from Amsterdam. Wow, thank you so much. So appreciate it. Lori Rising. How many of you are in touch with your pelvic floor now? Thank you. Oh, and the energy of Beating. Come on up here. Another fabulous presentation. Thank you. A big difference. Amanda, where are you? I heard Amanda had a fabulous presentation about instinctive breastfeeding. Dr. Lauren Campbell. Dr. Lauren's been around as long as I can remember. I don't think there's been a conclave yet that I've attended that you weren't present. Does that mean I'm older than you? I think so. Maybe just a hair. Thank you. And if I missed anyone, come on up here. Thank you so much, everyone. And I don't know if she's in the room, but a special thanks to Mara, who's really gone the extra mile. She's always shy to come up, but thank you so much. And there's one other person that this would never take place without, and that's Jose. If there's ever a problem, Jose fixes it. Yoli has been a great help. So all of you, thank you so much. Anyone else have announcements or? Oh, yes. Is Mickey listening? We hope so. Thank you so much, Mickey. This has been so wonderful. Isn't it amazing how the vision of one woman could change the world like she has? And I don't know if Tony's listening, but her assistant Tony has not only caring for Mickey and helping her, but all the administrative things that needed done, she did. So big hand for Tony as well. Make sure you get your pathways. And those of you who are new practitioners, did you know there's a perk from the ICPA that you get a free digital subscription to Pathways for the first 2 years? So take advantage of that. You should get that information when you're newly certified. Fantastic thing. And find an ICPA Webster certified chiropractor, partner up. It'll be fantastic. Yes, definitely, right? Win-win. Yeah. Is it lunchtime? All right. There's lunch waiting for you outside the door. Enjoy.